All right. Thank you again, everybody, for coming to what we are considering really the last meeting of this initial kind of stages of the working group on incentive-based qualifying capacity for demand response. We're calling it Putting It All Together 2. I am joined by Eric Lyon from the CEC today. Daniel is not able to join us today, but Eric will take the reins for this for the large part of the meeting. So our usual logistics, I believe, I haven't had a chance to check it, but I've been told that the DR Workshops website has been updated with pretty much everything now. Certainly, if you have any issue finding documents or recordings or anything like that, feel free to reach out to me. Let me know if there's an issue so I can have it fixed. And also, I can send you any documents that you're having trouble accessing. You're all muted. Unmute if you are going to speak. Otherwise, please stay muted. Raise your hand if you'd like to speak or use the chat. I don't know how you would raise your hand to use the chat, but that's what it says here. As always, make sure you're aware of your surroundings, your posture, and we just want you to be comfortable. It's a 2-hour meeting, but I think we've all had a lot of at-home experience now. And as always, the disclaimer: refrain from discussing any other proceedings in case commissioners are present to avoid inadvertent ex partes. Little overview, as you can see here, according to the original workshop schedule, this is 11/16, which would make it our final meeting. This is not going to be the final meeting of the whole process. This was kind of the final meeting of this get us going process. I'm not sure what I should be calling it, but anyway. Today we're going to talk, as we have so far, introductions, logistics, and scheduling. This is the final meeting. So then Eric will be presenting a BNLI regression example, much in the vein of how DSA presented theirs last week. We'll have a 5-minute break, and then we're going to have a short discussion on the data needs as we head into the study period. And then we'll talk a little about the plan for the study plan and then the next steps and general discussions. With that, I think I'm ready to hand it over to Eric for Putting It All Together, part 2. And I think he's going to take over the screen even for that. I don't know. Is that correct, Eric?
Yes, that is. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm going to walk through the bid normalized load impact regression methodology that hopefully you're all somewhat familiar with at this point. Thanks to Josh and Demand Side Analytics, Stephanie as well, for putting together some sample data for us that we could use to apply the methodology and hopefully come out with a relatively apples to apples comparison with the sort of BAM, PAM type approaches. So to start, I'll just introduce the sort of overview. I see this in 3 or really maybe 4 major stages. The first is the ex ante. This is, again, intended to be pretty much up to the DR provider. Of course, it will have to go to the CPUC for approval, but as the penalty mechanism gets sort of in place and hopefully trusted more, that will hopefully be less of a sort of a smaller exercise, I guess. Then we go into operations. That's sort of the 4th one, and not really counting that here. It's just you go participate in the CAISO market. Then that brings us to the ex post portion. So, calculate individual load impacts, determine bit normalized load impacts, and create a profile of capacity using the linear regression, and then sort of do what we do for the ex ante, which is apply the same planning temperature you did in the ex ante stage to demonstrate a capacity. And from there, you basically take the difference for all of those hours and months that you had a capacity commitment and basically compare the difference. So to go back to the first stage, we will start by developing capability profiles. I looked at, I see a hand from Luke.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt your flow there. Can you reverse to the prior slide, please?
Yep.
So step 5, methodology should be predefined in evaluation plan and approved by the PUC. Is the evaluation plan, is that submitted along with the capability profile equations?
Let's see. So is that submitted
As part of step 1 or a different step?
Yeah, and I guess this should really be items 1 to 2, because you'd submit the capability profiles as well.
Okay, so the evaluation plan is part of step 1 and 2.
Yeah. So I think we're trying to take a soft approach on the individual load impact estimation methodology. Trying not to address that there. I think, when I when I tried to have that conversation in the past, I think it maybe derailed the more important conversation about capacity counting. But yeah, I think this is just to say, you calculate the load impacts using whatever methodology is appropriate. I think it would make sense to include that in the evaluation plan, but I don't think that's a fundamental part of the proposal.
I apologize, Eric, I'm not being clear. What I mean by this is, where is evaluation plan mentioned in steps 1 through 4? Like, where does it say that evaluation plan has to be submitted? Or is 5, is the evaluation plan in subsumed within step 5?
I mean, I think I see your point is that the first time we sort of mention evaluation plan here is in the ex post. So I'm just gonna put that aside into the notes here for the moment. Yeah, I think that's sort of a process question that we weren't trying to address head on, but are open to a process that works.
That's fine. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail. I just want to, make sure that everyone understands what we're talking about, the different pieces here. Thanks.
Yes, that's important. Okay. So capability profiles, I used the data that Josh provided that had a time temperature matrix value assigned to sort of every hour that the resource was going to bid. I didn't have the sort of back-end equations to develop that. So I basically just did linear regression in the same sort of way that we're going to do the ex post. And so basically what I have here is for every hour, this is a linear regression, for example, of all of the hour ending 18 time temperature matrix values based on or relative to temperature. And so basically this becomes our capability profile. We say for anything below 72 degrees, we'll have 39.5 megawatts. For anything above, we'll add 5.64 megawatts for every degree we get warmer in the first hour.
Hey, Eric, did you pick like a single duration and start time here, or did you just from the exante the TTM, or are we mixing different start times and different end times?
The assumption is that the resource was always bidding hours 18 through 21, if I'm not mistaken. And so the sort of bid.
So did
These are the
did you pull
TTM BAM values.
I guess did you pull that from the TTM, because the TTM actually allowed to say start at hour 18, give me a 4-hour resource.
Right.
So was that what was done, or is this kind of like a mix between resources that started earlier and later?
Well, so this is using the TTM BAM value. So I'm assuming it's always bidding 18 as the first hour, and it's always 4 hours.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, so basically this regression line becomes, you know, what effectively what you would submit as or at least what I'm going to use in this example as the capability profile. Again, we want to leave as much flexibility for the DR provider to choose this profile on their own. It doesn't have to be specifically the output of a linear regression or anything like that. But for the purposes of explanation, that's just what we're going to use, represented in these cells here.
So Eric, hours 22 and 23 are basically snapback hours, right? They're not really impact hours.
That is correct. And I'm actually later when we get to the X post, I included them here, but when we get to the X post, I didn't analyze those because they're, there's kind of no relevant thing as like a bid for a take back value. So that's step one, capability profiles. Did I hear a question? No. Step two, we apply the planning temperatures or the worst day temperatures in this case. I'm using daily average temperatures here, so they don't change by hour of the day. This is so that, it's really reflecting the overall day rather than an individual hour. And, we know temperatures earlier in the day can impact heating loads later in the day or cooling loads later in the day, things like that. And so that gets you our ex ante capacity values by hour, by month.
So this is essentially like the worst day table, but only for June through October, and only for hours 18 through 23.
That's exactly right. And so you can then, put that into a slice of day table, format everyone is probably familiar with. But since this resource is only available June through October, we won't show any capacity in any other months, and same with the hours of the day. We'll only look at the hours that it's bidding into. And yeah, so again, I think this is really conceptually very similar to pulling values from the time temperature matrix. But instead of, generating a whole bunch of combinations of start times and temperatures and things, I'm pulling them directly, calculating them directly from these capability profiles. Again, you can add more than just a linear sort of regression with a change point, but you can sort of always calculate what that capacity value is from the capability profile. So, I think that really gets into step 4, which is just participate in the market. And so, we have all this data about what the temperature was, what the prices were, was the resource dispatched and in which hours. And, then in step 5, which again, we're not going to try to address too directly, you go and calculate the load impacts. So for every day that there was a dispatch, we have 24 hours worth of load impacts, but really just going to look at what the dispatch hours were. From there,
So just a quick question. Is this looking at the actual dispatch? The actual exposed events that were dispatched or just simulated?
This is the data that you provided, so I think it's actual.
Okay.
I think maybe possibly what you're getting at is how did I come up with this dispatch value since we didn't have.
Well, it's both the dispatch value and whether or not the load impacts are real, because when we get the real load impacts, we end up having fewer data points depending on the program, right? But go ahead.
Yeah, so I did measure the amount dispatched by the total amount bid times the percent dispatched, which works for this resource because because it's a pretty homogeneous group of a lot of small customers. But in practice, for kind of more diverse resources, you'd need the actual amount that was dispatched from KISO. So I simulated that because I didn't have it, but that's what we should, be aiming towards. And to your point, Josh, there's not that many values that we're actually going to calculate bit normalized load impacts for, which is represented by this column here. We're really only going to look at hours when there was a dispatch, and there was an amount bid into the market, and so for many hours you just don't see anything. I happen to be looking at kind of the start of the heat wave here. This is August 30, 31, but if you scroll back before that, there's a lot of values where they're just bidding, but nothing is happening from a dispatch perspective. So that's exactly right. So once we've calculated our bit normalized load impact values, we'll go into the regression stage. And so here, this is exactly where you're going, Josh. There's just a few values we really have for each hour of day, or each dispatch hour. We did decide to model these as relative to the hour of the dispatch rather than the hour of the day, just because we found that was a better model fit. Again, you can do this, as long as you sort of approve the model specification with the CPUC. We think this makes plenty of sense.
So Eric, let me understand this just to make sure I really understand. The initial proposal you had to run this regression by hour of day. But for an example, you pivoted and say we need to run it by hour of the event. So this is kind of showing here's the reduction in the first hour of the event, the second hour of the event, third hour of the event, despite the fact that we have different hours of the day. So is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
And when you ran it by hour of day, did you get just crazy results? I'm assuming that's the case.
It was not crazy, but it was not as clean. Oh, did I move something around here? It worked. It just didn't look as clean.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I anticipate would happen because there's two dimensions, right, to this. One of them is what hour of day is it, and what hour of the event is it, right? Which is whereas we're trying to make it a one-dimensional problem here. And in your case, you picked one or the other. I think when we were looking at the other approach, we're considering both. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's just with the number of data points we have, right? Like if you tried to to sort of differentiate between first hour when that hour is 18 versus 19, you're just not left with a whole lot of data, and like making those distinctions is not probably super meaningful. So it's probably and again, you could do that. There's nothing that would say you can't do that, but just with the amount of data that you're likely to have, it's, you know, it's probably more feasible to sort of just pick one or the other that matches your resource better. If you are sort of a BIP-like customer and you're basically going to drop your customer's whole load, it probably matters a whole lot more, you know, what time of day, you know, right? Like what the customer's load would have been, than what hour of the dispatch it is, right? But that's obviously not the case for this resource.
Eric, we have a
Yep.
question in the chat from Gil, Gil Wong from PG&E. He says, he asked if you could go through how BNLI is calculated. Working group members provided comments on your early proposal, and I'm not sure where we landed on it.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I guess I skipped that part. Let's go back to our performance data here. Let's see. Let's find a full dispatch, like a 4-hour dispatch. Once we get into September. Okay, yeah, so this is probably a little awkward to look at here, but this is the section we really care about here. So this is just saying, if this is a dispatch, let's calculate BNLI. Otherwise, let's just leave it blank. And so the first max function says, if you exceeded your even your bid, we will count your actual load impacts. But otherwise, we'll look at the minimum of your load impacts relative to the amount dispatched. So in this case, it would be the dispatch amount over the dispatch. So because it exceeded, it's getting 100% by this sort of internal measure here. This section here is 100%. And then you'd multiply that by the amount bid, subject to that sort of bid cap, bid cap. Is that helping, Gil? I didn't prepare sort of a separate slide on this since we've gone over that, but maybe you could let me know if that's helping. And I will send out this workbook later, so you can sort of poke around and actually look at the functions.
Are columns M and N, are they calculated or are they?
Oh, yeah.
Data? So
they are estimated, and I think Stephanie, did you? Is Stephanie on the call? Did you estimate those, or?
Can you ask that question again?
Did you estimate the bid 600 value?
Yes. The bit data is not.
The bit data is not real though, right?
Real, yeah.
Right.
So the bit 600. So it's all estimated.
Yeah, so basically what this is showing is we are, bidding some amount that goes all the way up to, a bid curve that goes all the way up to $1,000. For example, 70.86 megawatts total, but 64.35 of those megawatts were at or below $600. And that was one of the sort of guardrails we put in place to make sure that we're not using, really small dispatches to justify load impacts that were only bid at like $1,000 and very unlikely to be called in that scenario.
But the 600 number is not really important in this essence. It could have been a 800 cap. It's just that there's a cap where when you're dividing the bit. Okay.
Yeah. I see a hand from Nior.
Yeah, so what happens in this proposal if the bid is 0 for one of the contracted hours?
Oh yeah. Then if the bid is 0, or if they just don't bid, you would get a BNLI value of 0. And so this is I guess sort of our version of what the bid alignment metric is supposed to be doing. Is first you have to make your megawatts available to the market. If you're not going to do that, then that's going to affect your overall regression at the end.
So Eric, go ahead, Nor.
And if I remember, it's like you have to bid 20% at 600 at least for it to count, or something like that.
You have to have a dispatch of 20% of your bid.
Okay, yeah. So what if you just bid like 100 kilowatts?
Yeah, totally. You're allowed to do that. And the way that is going to work is if you bid 100 kilowatts on a tight day and you're dispatched, then you're going to see that, oh, this resource was only available for 100 kilowatts on this day.
Hey, Eric, there is something that we need to think about here, which is something that Nor raised in the last call in the chat, which is that when people are submitting bids to CAISO, as far as I understand, they can only say, here is the KW and here's the KWH until it exhausts. They cannot actually bid different amounts by hour, right? Where you're going to have like that fine tooth comb where you can say align this overall. So if you calculate BNLI by hour, you're going to be way off every single time.
No, it's not true that you can't. No, you can vary bids by hour.
But you can't vary a 4-hour dispatch window.
You can't say bid 5 hours. But if I get dispatched in hour 2, then then have a different dispatch. No.
So basically, you have to bid in a block. You can't bid in customized values by hour.
Right.
And that's going to be an issue for both your proposal and my proposal, quite frankly. Right? I think you've been rich with yours.
Sorry, you can do customized values. You can't do conditional values by hour.
Right.
Yep.
So I think what we're getting at here, let me zoom in here so we can see this a little better. But for example, this is September 1st, we're bidding a little over 100 megawatts here. We're not dispatched in the first hour. We're bidding 72 in the second hour. We are dispatched for most of that, the bid 600 amount at least.
But you can perform a lot more.
But the only way you know to bid 72 for the second hour is if you know you've been called for hour 1.
No, well, I think it's probably, in this case, it looks like there's like a degradation. So I think the 94 is more reflective of what you'd be capable of starting in the second hour. So if you wanted to really do a fine-tooth comb in bidding, you could say, like, if you got a day ahead award in the second hour, you could submit a really low real-time bid for that incremental amount if you wanted to be more aligned with what you think you can actually deliver.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. That idea came up in another conversation, but I know there was an issue around the long start resources. Are you like, even if you were just submitting a bid to sort of true that up, right? To say, oh, I didn't get dispatched in hour 1, so I'm gonna just increase my hour 2 bid to be more realistic of what the overall resource can do. Is that allowed even if you're a long start resource?
Yeah, if you are flagged as real-time dispatchable, if you're a long start resource, you can, if you get a day ahead award, you can adjust your bids in real time. If you don't get a day ahead award, don't get a ruck, then you can bid wherever you want in real time. You're not going to get an award in real time at all.
What I'm hearing though is you can only do the timely customized bids if you're bidding the real time market. So if you're only bidding the day ahead market, you're not going to be able to get this granularity.
Yeah.
But
You're only going to be able to bid in a block, and by definition, it'll be off for hours 2, 3, and 4, or one subset of hours. So because basically you can tell them, hey, here's the resource, here's when it starts, here's the amount of kWh I have, until it's exhausted. But that's all you can tell them, unless you're actively bidding in the real time market and say, I got dispatch hour 1, so let me adjust my bid for hour 2.
Yeah, and the utility programs, the SC folks especially can jump in here, but they're RDRRs, so they can bid in the real time market. But if they're doing day ahead bid, if they were bidding economically day ahead, which I don't know if they necessarily do, then they could bid in the real time market, but it wouldn't actually change it unless there's actually emergency.
Yeah, so I mean, for this to work, everybody would have to be bidding in the real-time market if they wanted to customize values, unless they're going to perform exactly the same by hour.
Can I just clarify real quick? I think I heard two different things about the hour by hour bidding. I think, Josh, when you said a block, you didn't mean that you can only bid, say, 105 megawatts across these other 3 hours, did you?
Well, no, basically, if you're bidding in the day-ahead market, right, and let's say I have a 4-hour resource, the way you would bid it then, as far as I understand, is you say, let's make 100 megawatts. I have 100 megawatts and it exhausts after 400 kWh is being used of MWH, right? So effectively, you can't tell it. I want a different. If you call me for, let's say, hour 17. I want to have an adjusted number for hour 18 and a different number for hour 19, right? You can't do that. You're basically bidding and saying, here's the dispatch that I have X amount of resource, and you get cold. In order to be able to customize stuff, you would need to be participating in the real-time market and adjusting your bids. And that's the whole point of conditional, right? If you're in the real-time market, you can say, I got cold, so let me adjust the bid for the next hour. If you're bidding in the day-ahead market, you're not going to be able to make that adjustment.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if anyone wants to clarify more in places on this call, but that's my understanding.
But you can, sorry, and let me just make sure, because I think there's two issues that I'm hearing here. But the first is, RAIM aside, you can bid 4 different values for these 4 hours, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And then the second question is, what can you do in the real-time market? And I thought I heard Nora say, if you had a day-ahead dispatch, you can adjust your bid in real time, even if you're a long start. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, you can. I mean, it can be a painstaking process. Don't want to speak for everyone that it's not necessarily. It can be operationally intensive, but you can. Yes.
Got it.
But Eric, I think you're also missing a key point. Even if you bid, it can provide different amounts for different hours in the day-ahead market. Once it get cold, right? Unless I'm bidding in 1 hour increments, I'm cold, right? So, so looking at the resource you have, right? If you were cold in hour, I can't tell what hour, hour 17, you would still, the value would not auto adjust to say, well, my value for hour 18 needs to be differently because now it's the second hour of the event, unless you're participating in the real-time market, right? So if I'm bidding in a resource in the day-ahead market, I can tell them, hey, I have 100 megawatts available, and I can keep the 100 megawatts for 4 hours. Right. So the point being here is we're going to have to either adjust the BLI or the PAM somehow, right, in the process, to either account for things at the event level rather than the hourly level, or have a clear set of rules that says here's how folks need to bid in and what does a bid mean, right? Because I'll look at somebody like pick a third-party aggregator, they may bid a whole bunch of 1 hour events. Somebody else will bid and say, okay, well, I want to bid a resource and say, here's my trigger and I can sustain this for 4 hours. And that scenario is not going to really fly unless you want to be cold hour 18, 17, skip an hour, be cold hour 19.
And
Right.
I mean, given the NBT prices, you probably get awarded if you did a
Consecutive
really low
hours.
price, but it's also like not a guarantee. And there is some risk involved in bidding at a low price for an incremental capacity that there's reason to not want to undergo that risk, even if you think you can deliver more, in case things don't work out in real time.
I saw Jill's hand up, but then it went down. Jill, did you have anything you wanted to respond with? Sounds like.
Going to ask, it would be nice if you can modify your. Yes, I was thinking about something you presented earlier in the PowerPoint.
Sorry, I think you cut out for just a sec. The last word I heard was modify.
Modify the proposal that you had in writing so that we can see everything on paper. That will help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's still generally consistent with what was in the proposal. I think probably the only big difference is this kind of bid or price cap. But yeah, the BNLI concept is still pretty much the same.
Eric, I'm going to suggest we kind of
The
move
20%
forward.
threshold.
What's that?
Are we adopting
Can I
the
make
20% threshold?
For the 20% threshold? Sorry, I think you're cutting out just a little bit again. I didn't quite catch.
Sorry, I was just saying, are we adopting a 20% threshold, meaning we only take bids? I mean, not bids, but dispatch that are at least 20% of the bid.
I mean that was the proposal. It's of course subject to discussion, but yeah, that is correct.
Oh, yeah, and I think it was Josh who chimed in, but I think Eric, if you could move on, and so we could
Yeah.
resolve.
So back to the regression step. I think when there's a decent amount of data, you can see this works pretty well. Hours sort of 1 and 2 have pretty nice behavior here. Things start to get wonky in hours 3 and 4. This is a very small amount of data in a very small range of temperature values. And so, for example, in hour 3, we get this negative sloping value. In hour 4, we get a really, really high slope. And I think there's 2 ways to look at this, and one is like, wow, this is really sensitive, maybe not a great idea. Which I think is fair, honestly. I think the other way to look at this is, this DR provider gave us very little to work off of, right? They're asking to substantiate a capacity value, for hours 3 and 4 that is in theory temperature dependent, and yet the evidence to reach that conclusion is actually not great.
But it's inside their control. I mean, the DR provider just submits bids to KAISO. KAISO makes the event calls.
I think that's true. I think the argument here is that you kind of need to bid a little bit more competitively if you want to develop a good record of data.
Yeah, but Eric, I'm going to push back on this. This is a capacity resource, not an energy resource. you bid it, you dispatch it more often, you're going to lose your customers, you're going to lose the capacity, right? So in practice, that sounds easy, but you want the things to show up when it matters, which is typically less than 1% of hours, and it's not even every single year, right? Like 2023 was not that hot. 2022 was pretty hot overall. So you want it to show up at the right time, not at every single hour and exhaust the resource. Otherwise, you're going to be pushing customers outside of those programs.
Yeah, I mean,
So I mean, the way we typically do this, to be blunt about it, is almost nobody ever runs a regression to figure out what is your capacity over the course of 1 year. They look at 2 to 3 years currently. They look at it across multiple years and get as much evidence as they can to say, here's what you're getting from what is the trend that you have over time, and how does it respond?
yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense with some types of programs. I just think with some types of programs, it's not going to work as well. It's portfolios are changing, customer bases are growing, new types of customers that you're just not going to have a ton of data for.
But I think hours 3 and 4 will be problematic because, again, it's up to KAISO whether they call it for the 3rd or 4th hour. So a lot of the dispatches that come from KAISO are basically saying, give us 2 hours and that's it, right? Rather than saying, give us all 4 hours. So really, like you can bid it, but the question is, will it be called? Will it be needed at that level? And that's really a big issue, right, for the 3rd and the 4th hour. Or the 5th, if you have a longer duration resource.
Great. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's fair. I do think one benefit of the BAM-PAM approach is that we don't need to do the re-estimation step, which is basically what this is, which, again, works totally fine if there's plenty of data, but stops working super elegantly if if there's not a lot of data. That said, there are still, okay, so anyway, we take our regressions with our performance data, just like we did in the first step. We generate our performance profiles. We're going to use the same model specification that we did. So again, we're going to use the same change points in this particular example, but we're going to re-estimate these parameters. And then that gives us capacity values over here. Again, we're getting some pretty wonky capacity values for the cooler months when in hour 4 when this goes negative. But because of the way the performance mechanism works, that's not going to have a huge impact on the overall. So I will flip to that next.
Could you go back to that set of results just to make sure we fully understand?
Sure.
So you're basically saying that the capacity for June is -85, for July is -35, and then it goes positive for August and September. And that's primarily driven by the negative values in hour 4. Is that correct?
That would be true if we just took a straight average of these, right? But that's driven obviously by one kind of outlier here, this very large negative number. So these are not the numbers that we're going to apply the penalty to. This is just for sort of reference.
So why wouldn't those be the values that you end up applying the penalty to?
Okay, let me get to that. So I started, I think one of the questions is like, well, can we just apply this hour by hour? And I think the answer is yes, if we have sort of a way to weight those different hours. I don't think we want to. I don't think we want to do sort of a straight average across hours and then apply the penalty to that for exactly the reason you're getting at, Josh. But so I took sample capacity values from the RA report just to get an idea of the general trend. It's highest in September, which is typically the hottest month. And then I also assigned sort of hourly prices. For reference or like relative hourly prices, I just said, let's make the contract value overall, these, 6 months across 4 hours, worth $1 million, just so we can compare to that, make it easy and round. And then I use these, relative prices to come up with hourly, monthly capacity prices. And so if you apply the normalized, or excuse me, the CSP as sort of proposed with the 5% buffer, if you apply that to each one of these, even though this is, negative 498, that still results in a revenue of 0 for that month, that hour, right? It doesn't go negative.
So Eric, just to make sure I understand, because this is not what I understood to be the capacity shortfall approach. You're really applying that the pattern to every single hour and every single month, right? The capacity shortfall, rather than look at it overall. You're kind of saying, I'm gonna look at it for individual hour for individual month, rather than say you're gonna look at it in total.
Right. So if we, I mean, it sort of depends on what
yeah.
you mean by looking at it overall, because we are looking at it overall.
Well, I could multiply it, just simply here's the capacity values I got times the dollar amounts and do a sum product of the two matrices right there, and
Right.
say here's the total performance that I had, and based on that, without zeroing out individual values. The reason why we don't end up with a negative, with a big penalty here, is because you're zeroing out just hour 4, right, in total, in general, rather than individually. So the order of operations here is going to make a huge difference.
It does matter.
In terms of the answer. So if I did it like that in the overall approach, which is what I thought was the initial proposal, we will get a very different answer.
Right. Yeah. So this is, if you do that, you get 74, which apply the CSP to, you get something like 50% or $500,000. But that's right. So so I agree, and the weighting matters, and I just made up these sort of weights of,
No, but under the, if I remember, under the PAM metric, it overperformed, right? If I remember correctly, on average, when you consider all the hours that were called, because it was not taking that 1 hour that's completely off and extrapolating it way out of sample.
Yeah, I think that is true. The only sort of issue with PAM is, for example, if this is our profile here, our ex ante profile, and this is our ex post, we see that it overperforms at these lower temperatures, but then, starts to underperform a little bit at these higher temperatures. And so, that's sort of the PAM as proposed sort of assumes those megawatts or megawatt hours really are like fungible kind of between, this area and this area. So I'm okay using that too.
Well, the way to fix that, right? We kept that simple. We kind of discussed a fix, which would be to like weigh more critical hours more heavily than less critical hours.
Yeah. And I think that is probably one good solution to that.
Okay. Just understanding, just trying to understand, Eric, not to give you a hard time. Just to clarify.
So I think that's about it. We'll send this out following, but I guess the upshot here is that, this resource would have gotten $885,000, 886 out of its, million contract value.
Eric, in this workbook, is there a slide that describes what's on each slide?
We sort of have it here. There's, some of these kind of have multiple steps on each, on one tab. So, all the performance data through calculating the bid normalized load impact is on this slide, for example.
And where is the data for people to, like, if they wanted to play, is there some parameters that they can alter and play around with it? I mean, I know they can do it everywhere almost, but
Yeah,
I think
I mean, this is the sort of raw data submitted by Josh and Stephanie. So you're definitely welcome to play around with this or add in your own data, whatever. Yeah.
But there's no parameters like slope or anything like that, or.
Yeah, I mean, so it's all estimated in here from the actual data. So yeah.
Hey, Eric, one big question. What happens if the hour 4 was not cold at all? So if the resource was not cold for hour, say they only got cold for 2-hour events because it was a relatively mild summer. So what happened to hours 3 and 4?
I think you would, the DR provider should be responsible for getting at least one dispatch, which like could be a test, or they could just bid low to try to make a dispatch happen, or whatever.
So in practice, you're saying like, look, but I mean like the bid normalized value does not. How does that apply to test events?
So for a test event, it's assumed to be sort of a full resource event. So there's sort of no idea of, say, like a partial dispatch, and it's really just like whatever whatever the megawatt value is, that's what you get.
So in practice, right, if you are operating over here, you have no control over when KAISO is going to call you. So just add a routine, you probably would want to call 2 different test events, ideally hotter conditions for if you're a weather sensitive resource, that would give you like the ability to kind of say, here's the line pattern. But you may be fitting the data for 2 points, right, for hours 3 and 4, because those tend to be called less often by KAISO. So there's a good chance that you're not going to get market dispatch in those hours. So therefore, you would have to be scheduling at least 2 test events to at least make sure you have a slope.
Yeah. I think we even sort of put in the proposal sort of what happens if there's only one event, and it's just you treat that as the value across all temperatures. That's just is what it is. It's putting a lot of eggs in one basket, but.
Is there any procedure process to scheduling a test event? I mean, how do you track the test event? How do you make sure that you got what you got when you wanted, overall, that kind of aspect of it? Or is somebody just tell you after fact I ran a test event? Here's the data.
I will defer to CPUC and KAISO on that. I don't think I would change the test rules from the status quo unless folks think there's a good reason to.
I'm gonna have to talk with do a little bit more on how it's actually done now to kind of have a good answer to that. But I said my first thought is, I don't think there's any necessary reason to change it.
Josh, what was the question?
Oh, it's about test events. Is there any tracking of them, or basically your procedures for ensuring that you record a test event?
Are you talking about the test events that we require DRPs to submit to us currently?
Yeah. Well, I'm basically looking at the proposal, the BNLI proposal, and to me, it's very apparent that if you're a demand response provider, you want to call at least 2 events that cover the full set of hours, because otherwise you don't know whether you'll be dispatching the market to cover the full set of hours.
Right.
You
of
know,
course. I understand what you're getting at. We'd have to talk about that if it's necessary and how to go about that.
Are there any other comments on Eric's presentation? We are pretty close on schedule, so Let's take our 5-minute break. Actually, let's make it a 7-minute break. We'll be back at 4:05. And then we will, I don't know if we'll need the full hour after that, but we have a couple more things to discuss. So, see everybody at 4:05. Okay, everybody, welcome back. We are going to continue on to the next section, and the next section there is really just kind of somewhat of an open discussion. I guess there may not be much of a discussion, but as we go into the um, testing period, both these proposals have an ex ante portion that relies on data from the demand response providers. And so we haven't, we're not asking for you to send us any data at this point. We don't have any, we're not doing a formal like proposal right here. What we're doing is we're just trying to gauge a little bit how we would go about determining what kind of data would be able to be provided, what kind of who would like to participate or who has qualms about it. And then we probably will maybe have one-on-one maybe with folks when it comes to the data, or we may have an email going out specifying. But I just wanted to give maybe some of the parties and Eric or Josh, if you have things to add regarding your own proposals, what do you think the data, how the data, the ex ante data that is needed can be handled. I don't know if anybody has anything to say about that, or if there's Josh has his hand raised. Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, I do think I mean, from the data, the ex post and time temperature matrix and or capability profile data should be pretty straightforward to generate. I think we need a few, third-party providers to join in and kind of add data, because I think a lot of the data is public for the utilities and pretty easy to pull together. And we've compiled quite a bit of it actually already. The one that's really hard to come by is bid data. And not necessarily the price data, because that can be touchy, but the actual quantity bid amount. But even if we do get it, it's tricky because once you set different rules going forward, your behavior changes, right? So past behavior may not be future behavior. And that's probably the biggest concern on the testing from my standpoint. It's just understanding, are we being realistic about the ability of people to bid and how they would submit the bids in doing the testing? I don't have any issues with all the historical data, either on TTMs, because you can develop TTMs pretty easily, or on the ex post data, because a lot of it's public. I think the biggest challenge in both proposals, quite frankly, is real bid data that will reflect how people can actually bid into the market and would reflect what they would do with the change in rules. I think that's the biggest issue.
Yeah, this is certainly an issue that comes up in basically all these kind of an economics or sense. You kind of have to use the data that isn't really necessitating the policy change that you're looking at. And, it is something. It is an issue, and it would mean when we do the analysis, it's going to inform certain things, but there's certain caveats that'll go along with it. Because there's no way at this point, obviously, to have an exact data set that would dictate what would happen in a real, if these were really influenced. Eric, did you have something?
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to mention, we are in the process of requesting a lot of the data from CAISO. So we will have some of the bid data. I think you're 100% right, Josh. It's like, by definition, proposing a new system, providers are going to act differently than they acted under the old system. So I think it's sort of a gut check to say, well, if you had participated this way under the new system, what would you have been, rewarded or penalized with? I think the one piece, so I think we can do a lot with just the CAISO data. And then we can sort of share results kind of one-on-one to individual DR providers. We can talk about whether some sort of anonymized or aggregated approach would work as well. I think the one thing that we would really need from the DRPs, and I guess we have these through the lib filings. So we might need them reformatted or something, but the sort of better estimations of load impacts, right? Because otherwise we would just get the DR, what is it, DREM, DR energy measurement from the CAISO, and those will be using the kind of standard settlement baselines. So we could use those as a proxy as well, but we know there's issues with those for some types of resources. So I think that's really a call for the DR providers that if you want to work with us and get really good results, to work with us to get that data in a format that we can ingest for this purpose.
I think we're going to need to be pretty cautious in the bid side, right? Because I mean, like there's two components to both methods, right? There's the performance and there's the bid. And my sense is they're going to have to tread more carefully in the bid side than we do in the performance side, just because it's going to have more embedded assumptions in general. So I'm trying to sort out what's the right way to arrive at to really understand whether these methods would work on the bid side and how they would need to be adjusted, right? Because to me, it's pretty clear that there's limitations in how the resources can be bid, given the way that the CAISO market takes in the bids. And unless folks are really adjusting bids in real time, to kind of reflect here's what's going to happen hour 2, hour 3, etc., it's going to be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, and so when we really sit down and look at the data, there's going to be some things which we can only kind of test in a more kind of almost anecdotal way, which would be like a price cap, because nobody's bidding with a price cap in mind right now. So we can look at the data anecdotally and see if there's anything, but we would also understand that there isn't a price cap, and so if they're all going over 600, it doesn't mean it really doesn't tell us much about whether they would or wouldn't get this in place. So it would be a lot of the analysis would be a lot about just sanity checking just the calculation methods and seeing like where if there's some outliers or if there's unexpected situations that just seem to happen more often than people think and things like that.
Well, the other consideration there is, I mean, like, part of what you want is for things to be showing up in the market and to be made available in the market, right?
Yeah.
Now the question is, if you can't put in the bids in exactly the way that the resource will perform, you obviously want to get as close as you can. But one alternative there might be to kind of just weigh in and say, just narrow down to that question. Are you bidding into the market when needed and making yourself available? Rather than are you bidding precisely the right amount if folks cannot bid in the right amount of their capability in a way that is going to reflect their true capability. It's just a thought, but that's a question, that I think we can think about. Whether,
Right.
How do we factor it in? Because the objective of this is not energy, it's capacity, right? And capacity
Right.
credit. And really the main purpose for any of these resources to be in the energy market is not to produce energy. Again, repeat myself by saying that DR typically does not produce energy, right? The main purpose of it is to provide a service, which is either really fast response if you're in an ancillary server market in Texas, or or capacity in this case. So maybe the focus should be on more, are you making yourself visible in the market and available in the market, rather than are you, putting in the exact amount if you're unable to do so. Just a consider, just a thought.
Yeah, and maybe Eric can correct me, but I kind of think of it as a different way. At least what we're trying to do here is that we're trying to encourage QC, accurate QC estimates, if you will, by the DR providers. And the levers that we would do that are checking out if you are actually delivering and showing up. Those bidding them in and then showing up as you like. So maybe it's semantics, but I think the ex ante part is kind of a very important part of what we're trying to do here, and not just seeing if people are bidding and delivering. But it probably just could be semantics that I'm talking about here.
Yeah, I didn't really have anything to add to that, but I just kind of wanted to see if anyone from the CAISO had any thoughts or wanted to respond. I don't know if we still have them on. I suppose.
Jill Howard?
Oh, yes, he's Jill and
I
Christy.
don't want to put anybody on the spot. I'm just seeing who's.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, this is Jill. I don't know if Christy had any comments. Yeah, I'm kind of listening to what Josh has to say, but concerned, and I'm glad that David kind of, moved beyond the discussion, the argument against the energy versus the capacity, which is what we're hoping that this workshop gets to, a capacity value that can be fairly represented through the bids within the markets. A lot of what's been discussed here, yeah, I can see some of the issues that are being brought up. I think the points have been brought up fairly, that there is some capabilities to adjust between the day ahead and real time if it's recognized that there's not available energy as to what has been dispatched. So I think you've kind of, generated or gone through some of that discussion. But yeah, I think just bottom line, we're looking based on how the markets, how these resources are represented with the markets, how the bids are represented within the markets, the market mechanisms that are in place, the parameters that are currently in place for these resources, which I was going to bring up before. Daily energy limits are part of a parameter that's available for these resources, and it may or may not be in. I know NOR probably has better understanding of how it could or couldn't be utilized based on the earlier discussion. But yeah, that's the only comments I would have.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, appreciate your input on that. One other thing is occurring to me that we could use the support from DR providers on, and that is effectively coming up with would-be capability profiles. I think we could theoretically kind of back calculate these from LIP filings possibly, but it might not be super. Yeah, it might be challenging for us to do that on your behalf, and we'll probably get stuff wrong. So I think it would be better if we could sort of work together to find a way to format those in a way that we can ingest.
Yeah, and we are, obviously we're going to be doing the testing, and we'll have some ideas about what we need, or what is and isn't working very well. So, even though this is the last meeting here, this is not the end of the communications we will be having, or possibly follow-ups and things like that. And we don't need an answer. We're not looking for an answer, or from any DRPs right now or anything like that. So just something to maybe start considering on your end, if as you start maybe thinking about how your position on this is, or if you want to maybe help the process along. Are there any other questions on this topic? If not, I can move on to the next one, or comments.
Just one comment. My offer still stands that if anybody needs help developing a capability profile or a TTM, happy to help here.
Yeah. So the next one is what we work on. What is the study plan? And this is the study plan, so to speak. This is kind of how we're going to go about developing the study plan. Just as an idea, the study plan is going to be kind of our outline about the data we're going to be using, how we're going to use that data in various scenarios, possibly what we're looking for, maybe what we're trying to answer, and how we're going to incorporate other, the conclusions we want, and maybe into the final report or elsewhere. We don't have the outline. We've discussed about. I think we're going to start it soon, but we'll have a draft study plan hopefully by December 12th. And then we will probably schedule another meeting on December 15th, 14th, to talk about it and present it. We'll make comments due about a week later, right before the holidays. Hopefully it doesn't interrupt too many people's holiday plans. And then since it's the holiday, we'll probably have some sort of final study plan sent out in January. We don't have the dates for that, but that's kind of the idea of the study plan. I don't know if there's any comments on that right now for that, but I'm willing to take any comments or questions. Otherwise, I can move on. Does that?
Good afternoon. This is Lisette Garcia from Mazzini. Related to the schedule about the comments that are due on December 21st, could it be possible to move the comments to the first week of January? Most of the people are out the last week of December.
So they're out the last week of December, so you want them the first week of January instead of before the holidays?
Yes, or if we wanted to kind of stretch up and move December 14, like a kind of week earlier.
We can probably. I don't want to commit to it right now, but let's certainly take it under consideration. If they weren't, let's put it this way: if we moved it late instead of December 20, instead of moving the other ones earlier, we probably would move the comments available to later in January, as you said. We're already on November 16 with the holidays coming up, so I don't really want to stretch it.
Okay, thank you.
Commit to anything earlier than the 12th. So, but yeah, we certainly. Right now, my mind is saying there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to. But we're really kind of in a. We're not an official proceeding and all that. So we're not going to object to additional suggestions or comments we get, but we do like to have kind of a formal time so that we can really start to coalesce and work around certain time frame. So then we're going to talk about our next steps. So I wrote here, so it says here no comments on today's meeting. That's from the old slide. There are actually comments we're asking for. We're giving you a little bit of extra time because of the holidays. November 30th, they'll be due. It says here comments on this in the previous meeting, the DSA meeting, where we talked about the DSA proposal, and then we had a couple of others. You certainly, since this is a time for when we will be starting the study plan and all that, we would welcome other comments. I think I don't see any reason why we would oppose comments regarding the study plan going forward, or things that you would like to see in the study plan, or other things that you think are missing or important. We can't say that they will all be addressed, but we are not going to. We're not too picky right now on the comments. So we said the study plan meeting in mid-December. Other than that, we have no other immediate meetings planned. We will reach out to parties regarding issues, questions, and data along the way. The analytical work will likely continue through April. That was the original time frame that was discussed for that. But this isn't the end of the working group. We'll have some ad hoc working group meetings along the way, whether they're to discuss the results, whether to discuss the draft final report, or maybe or some other issues that we may have or want to talk about, or give updates to along the way. I did make a note, we're going to be going into, over a year now before the final report is due. Just make sure that we have the same, you kept that on the distribution list. If you leave, or if somebody else gets assigned, make sure that they contact myself or Eric or Daniel, or to be put on the distribution list. I should. The spelling is not good there, but and we will make sure that person gets on. We don't want you to miss any upcoming meetings or anything like that. And again, the final report is due December 2024. We'll almost certainly have drafts in between there for people to discuss. And at this point, I don't have any answers on how it gets into the record in terms of the RA proceeding at this point. I don't know. It would not be though in this RA cycle. It would be in the next one if it does happen. So, are there any questions at this point? And we're open. You can, if you have other things you wish to discuss with us, we'll definitely try and be available during this time to discuss. I don't want to speak for Josh, but he's he would love, I'm sure, to talk about his BAM at.
I have a question.
Yes, please, miss. I'm sorry.
Yes, sorry. This is Colin Smith from Loop. You said that this would not be in the current or the upcoming RA cycle. I believe that was for the OIR that was released recently is for 2025 and 2026. Does that mean this wouldn't be implemented until 2027?
That would be my guess. Natalie, is that right? Is that correct? That this would at earliest go into the next OIR or the next RA OIR? It cannot be implemented for 2027.
Well, yeah. Let me think about this. So just walking through the process, again, the RA proceeding kicks off every year, this time of year, as we have this year. The next RA proceeding will start in September 2024. So this report will be fed into that proceeding. The decision will not come out until 2025. And since the decision is a year ahead decision, it will not be implemented until 2026.
And when you say implemented in 2026, you mean 2026 year ahead for the 2027 year?
Let's see. I think it would be for 2026 compliance year. I don't see any issues with it being implemented for the 2026 compliance year, given that the decision will have been approved or voted out by 2025.
And certainly a lot of details are to be worked out, but this would almost certainly be based on the month ahead filings, I would think. I don't want to say too much, but the year ahead is only 90%, and so then yes.
Sorry, this is Luke Chugas, consultant for the council. So forgive me for interrupting. The problem with I'm not sure, Nelly. That's correct, because if the decision is coming out in June of 25, that means the LIP reports will have already been submitted for that year. And so for the RA process for the 2027 year, right? Am I getting confused here? So it's in
No.
Oh,
Yeah. Look, I think you're correct. I mean, I think you're correct, because the decision gets approved in May or June 2025, and the filings for 2026 will have occurred on April 1st. Right.
Yeah.
So technically, I mean, realistically, I should say, the implementation of anything that gets approved will not be applicable until the 2027 compliance year. You're right.
Yeah.
I think because of the overlap with the filing deadlines for the LIPs in April. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so that's a good question. Yeah, so looks like the earliest compliance would be in 2027. Start with 2026 compliance filings. Eric, do you have a comment?
Me?
Yeah, you put your camera on usually.
Oh no, I've
always been on. Okay. Yeah, so that's I don't know if there's any other questions there, comments from anybody. I'd like to really take this opportunity to thank everybody so far for helping us through this working group process so far to this point, especially those who presented throughout the course. Oh, Josh, you have a comment?
I wasn't sure if we're wrapping up the meeting, but I wanted to remind folks that I am going to make some code available and walk through a detailed example tomorrow on basically how to put together a temp temperature matrix and really do ex ante analysis. So you have 2 examples put together. They're already in place. I need to get like sign off from one team just to make sure I can share some information. But I think in general, it should be helpful to demystify the whole process. And I think for anybody else who wants to join, it's just useful to understand how that works in general. It's tomorrow at 2 to 3, if I remember correctly.
Luke?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank folks, the staff, really appreciate you taking on this job. I know it's a whole lot of work and, it's, I feel comfortable, we know we're not going to get everything we want out of this, but I think that, but I feel comfortable with the process and with the intent behind it. And so thank you for all of your work on this. Josh, I definitely want to call you out for all your contributions to this. And of course, everybody else who has participated in this process. Do appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. And I echo that, especially with the CEC staff that's worked hard on this, and and also the people who provided comments along the way to help guide us on the many issues here. And we are not done yet. We still have a ways to go. I also want to wish everybody happy holidays, Thanksgiving this week, and then the December holidays as well. So, or Thanksgiving next week, I guess. Be safe and oh, Noor has a comment. Go ahead, Noor.
I echo everyone else's sentiment. I just want to clarify, even if there's not implemented because of the CPUC process until 2027, is there an opportunity without an official decision to have test year in as early as 2025 or earlier? That wouldn't be financially binding, but because 2027 would be the ex post data for 2027 won't come until 2020 after 2025.
I don't know. I mean, that there might be implications that to how people may to asking people, because there's still going to be the other processes in place, the lit process, and so we don't want to. I don't want to do something, or I don't know if we'll be able to put in something in place that's a test year that overrides. I don't know. That's an interesting question, but we'd really have to think about the implications and then also how we would implement something like that, because we do have regulatory items that are currently in effect that we can't override without the proper process.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely something I think we should explore. But yeah, echoing David's sentiment that it's going to interact with things like RAIM, and so we'll have to figure out, but yeah, a lot of things to navigate there. But let's certainly continue that conversation, because it would be good to start testing sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No problem. Okay. Well, again, everybody have a happy and safe holiday, and we will keep in touch.
Thank you, David and Eric.
Thanks, David. And shout out to Daniel, since he can't be here today. Bye.
Thanks, guys.